All right, at this point, I think I just gotta say it. You should probably go and get a pair of these monitors. So these right here are the CLA10 monitors. They are a kind of new updated version of the famous NS10s, which are right here, which I mixed on for over 10 years. I'll tell you in a few minutes what I found when comparing the new CLA10s to the NS10s, but in a nutshell, for now, I'll just say they're pretty much interchangeable. Now, this is not a sponsored video, okay? I bought these CLA10s with my own money. I wanted to try them out, and I wasn't really planning on doing this kind of video, but I've been getting a lot of questions. I think some of you guys have been just seeing them on the desk behind me. Some of my mastermind members, course members have known that I've got them, and everyone's asking me, like, what do you think of these? Should I get them? How do they compare to the NS10s? So we'll answer all those questions here. So why did I say off the top of this video you should probably get some of these? Well, for me, you could probably relate to this. Coming up as a kind of amateur beginner audio engineer, you'd constantly see these speakers in videos, right? The NS10s, you'd see them in like every studio, every mixing video. They had these. You talk to old engineers and they'd talk about the NS10s, like you gotta have NS10s. Everybody mixes on NS10s. And honestly, the first time I actually heard a pair was when I was interning at a bigger studio for a little bit, and I thought they sounded goofy. And that's actually the feedback I get from a lot of people who come in here mine. They're like, man, these sound really weird. And it's true. When I started mixing on these, I thought they sounded pretty bad. In fact, when I started listening to some of my favorite mixes and different reference mixes on the NS10s, how could a mixer actually mix on these and make these records sound good? And why do they sound so weird and kind of bad in my studio, but then when I take them to the car, they sound amazing? But even though I didn't really get it at first and it was hard to listen to them, I was like, you know what I'm doing is not working. My mixes aren't translating that well. I feel like I'm kind of stuck. I feel like I'm not hearing what I need to hear. I don't have like a powerful low mid or mid range in my mixes compared to other records. So even though I don't get it right now, I'm just gonna trust decades and decades of recommendation and experience, and I'm just gonna try it. I'm just gonna try to start mixing on these. Now, was it an overnight fix? Definitely not. But I very steadily and consistently started hearing an improvement in my mixes. And bit by bit, my mixes started translating better. And I was less and less surprised when I took my mix out of the studio and checked it in the car or checked it in headphones. So that was encouraging. I said, there's something to this. And within a couple months, I never wanted to mix without them. And to this day, I would feel very uncomfortable going to work in a studio that didn't have NS10s. In fact, now that I have these powered CLA10s, if I had to work somewhere that didn't have NS10s, I would just bring these guys. It's pretty convenient now. And I wouldn't be confident in the decisions I'm making and what I'm hearing if I was in a studio that didn't have either the NS10s or the CLA10s. And before I get to the differences between these two pairs of monitors and which one I would recommend, let me first just talk about why these speakers work. Like, what's the deal? Why do mixers love them so much? Well, I believe the reason why NS10s translate so well is because they force you to listen to and focus on the part of the mix that matters the most, and that's the mid-range. So if you take a typical consumer or a prosumer or even high-end monitor, they're very detailed and extended in their top end and low end, right? They've got a lot of sub-frequencies, below 100 hertz or below 80 or even below 60 hertz. So you really feel that punch and rumble in the low end. Then they've got this nice, smooth, silky, detailed, extended top end. And that's basically what I used to mix on before. I had the Yamaha HS80s. They had kind of that low end bump. They had a way brighter top end, or at least a more kind of extended detailed top end. And what happens when you're listening on monitors like that is your attention goes to those two extremes. Like, I was always spending so much time fiddling with the frequencies down at like 60 or 80 hertz and like obsessing over those and trying to make sure that all sounded powerful and big and glued together. And then likewise, I'd always be distracted by the extreme top end and spending a lot of time in the mix just fiddling with those really high frequencies and trying to get that right. And I would kind of just ignore the mid-range. Now, the problem with that is that those extreme ends of the frequency spectrum, they're the ones that don't translate that well, because different speakers, different headphones, different listening environments, those are the frequencies that are gonna get affected the most, especially the low end. Like, if you're focusing on 60 hertz in your mix and spending an hour trying to nail that, well, guess what? Every car, every headphone, every monitor, every room that you listen in, it's gonna sound completely different. So what the NS10s do is they don't really let you hear those extreme ends, especially the low end. Like, once it gets to about 100 hertz, it starts to slope off pretty quick. And that completely changed how I mix. So instead of spending like an hour or two focusing on those sub frequencies, I now spend like literally 3 to 5 minutes. I'm not kidding. Like, I can't even hear much below 80 or 100 hertz when I'm mixing on the NS10s or the CLAs, and I just focus entirely on the mid-range. And I know that if I can get a big, powerful sounding low end, which is really kind of the low mids, on these speakers, I know it's gonna sound big out in the car, on headphones or wherever else I listen to it. It's those mid-range frequencies, from maybe 100 up to like 4 or 5K. If you can get that sounding really tight, really big and powerful and thick and full, then your mix is gonna sound great everywhere. And mixing on these speakers just forces you to listen to that because you don't really hear that extreme low end and you don't really have a nice, shiny, distracting, polished high end. And there's a secondary reason why that works really well. It's because these sound pretty much the same everywhere. I've taken these to so many different mixing rooms and mixing environments, and as soon as I fire it up and listen, it's like, oh yeah, sounds like what I'm expecting. And again, I'm no acoustics expert, but I think that's because it's not pumping out those really big low end frequencies, so it's not exciting the room very much, and so you're not getting that interference of frequencies building up or canceling each other out as much as you would on other speakers. All right, so maybe I've sold you a little bit on NS10s, but should you get the old ones? Should you go for one of the new pairs of CLA10s? Well, when I first got the CLA10s, I put them up side by side, right beside each other with the NS10s, and when I A/B'd them, I could definitely hear a difference. And the first step was to try and match the sound of them, because on the active monitors here, there's a virtual tissue paper control on the back. I had to Google and find out what the heck that means. But that just basically controls the high end response of the speakers. So I A/B'd for a while and I tried to get that high end sounding pretty much the same as my NS10s. And then I flipped back and forth. And what I found was on the CLA10s, they just sound a little newer. They sound a little more modern. The low end goes like maybe a little bit further, and then the high end is maybe a little more extended as well. But very small differences, and overall the mid-range sounds pretty much the same. I mean, they're similar to the point that even when I had them side by side, I'm just flipping back and forth, and then I would just leave it on one for a while, within a minute, I would forget which one I was listening to. And so after about a week of that, I eventually just took down the NS10s, put up the CLA10s here, and I've actually mixed a legit paid project on those already. And guess what? It translated exactly the same outside of the studio, and while I was mixing, I didn't have any second guessing or lack of confidence in what I was hearing. It was basically the exact same experience. So the final word on this is I would be just as comfortable and just as confident mixing on either pair, the CLA10s or the NS10s. And if you're someone who's been struggling with getting your mixes to translate, or maybe you've kind of had the same kind of problems for a while, whether it's your mid-range sounding not powerful, having kind of a hole in the middle of your mix, or your low end or high end being really wonky, or maybe you're surprised at what you hear when you take your mix out of the studio and then into earpods or in the car or whatever, then maybe you should try a pair of these monitors. And I am someone who is very, very hesitant to recommend a piece of gear as a solution to a problem, but in this case, it might be worth a shot. It definitely worked for me. And remember, like I said, it's not an overnight fix, but there's a reason these things work. Hopefully I helped explain it a little bit, but at the end of the day, as weird as they are, and as much as you probably are not gonna like them when you first get them, just trust it. Trust decades of amazing mixers recommending these things, and you can trust the new version too, and I think it might just help your mixes. So there's a link in the description below if you wanna check out the CLA10s. Now this is not a sponsored video, like I said. Avantone has no clue that I'm making this video, but that is an affiliate link down there. Do your thing, and let me know in the comments what you think of the CLA10s if you've tried them, or if you're an NS10 guy, let me know. Let's talk about it. All right, take care, guys.